Well, obviously, the director can choose from many types of styles. And my rule of thumb is I always ask myself, what the theme of the film will be. And I even have the theme in one word usually, if I can. I always try to. And I think the theme should suggest the style. And that's the good reason why many of my films, especially in my more youthful career, are very different from one each other. I mean, The Godfather is a very classical style. Apocalypse Now is a very wild, free style. One from the Heart is a very theatrical style. I chose each style because of what I thought the film's theme, what it meant. And I felt the style should support the theme.
There's a real playfulness to the geometry of the space that, as you say, feels quite theatrical. The different sizes things are. It is an enhanced reality. So I was wondering if you could talk just a little bit more about some of those choices for One from the Heart.
Well, One from the Heart was conceived and unfortunately in the last minute wasn't performed how I intended it to be, partly because it was meant to be done as live cinema. In other words, in those days, the load of film in the camera was 10 minutes. There was no electronic camera in the time of One from the Heart. So although I planned it to be shot all like live cinema, in other words, all edited and with music, everything done live, I could only do 10 minutes at a time. And the idea was that 10 minutes would be done that way, and then you would just take the 8 reels and splice them together and you'd have the finished movie and it wouldn't be edited. But as we approached time to do it, my photographer, who was someone I personally cared for tremendously, Vittorio Storaro, said to me, Francis, can we not do it all? Can we stop so I can change the lights and, it won't take long. So, and what I should have said was, if you can't do it, I have to fire you and get someone who can do it, because there are people who know how to do it. But I couldn't do that to someone I loved so much. And his colleague, Dean Tavaleris, sort of backed him up. So I think I'm 85 years old and I'm anticipating going into the great unknown relatively soon. And I must say that I have only 2 regrets in my whole life of and one was that I didn't fire them and say we're doing it live, because that's what we planned to do and we could have done it and we should have done it. The other regret I have is that we didn't leave the film industry to the young people better than it was when we got it. Those are my only 2 regrets in life.
For Tucker too, I especially love how you constructed the phone call scenes in that film, where there's 2 adjoining locations built for this rocket. Is that right?
In Tucker, I had always seen in movies in the 30s that they would sometimes build the 2 sets together. And so I did it. I did it because that was the period in which Tucker took place. I made Tucker in the style of a 30s movie. Since the Tucker was an innovative designed automobile, the Tucker was a sort of contraption. So I thought the film itself should be like that. And so I made Tucker almost as if it were a Tucker and tried to have that in the essence of the film. Interesting, I learned recently about something I didn't know, which is a very interesting fact, which is that before the Tucker, we all know what Heinz ketchup is, right? Heinz, everyone knows Heinz. Well, there was years ago in the early 30s, Heinz had a son named Russ Heinz, who died when he was 26 or 27, but who was an automotive genius and designed the car of the future, which was called the Cover. But before the Tucker, this young man, Russ Heinz of the Heinz Ketchup Company, design the car of the future that many of the Tucker ideas look as though they came from. Bram Stoker's Dracula was written right around the same date that the cinema was invented. The idea was to make it as if we were making cinema in 1905. And so we used the style of the cinema at the time that the Bram Stoker Dracula was written. That was the concept. Every time I do a weird style, there's a reason. When I made Dracula, I didn't want there to be a lot of sets. I wanted just big empty space. And my idea was, I said, let's just use the volume of the soundstage, and then, in a sense, the costumes would be the sets. And of course, that made my production designer at the time, who was a different one and will remain nameless for now. When the budget came in originally, I was suddenly $20 million over budget before I started shooting, because the sets were so expensive. So I said, but I don't really want all these sets. I want the focus to be on the costumes. And basically I fired the production designer and just had the assistant. And so those $20 million over budget went away instantly. And I got what I wanted, which was that the focus was on the costumes.
And I love the opening scene for that film too, and how quickly you're on the film's wavelength. And in Megalopolis, there's that very striking visual of the shadows, and it kind of reminded me of those dark silhouettes.
That's a theater technique. That's what's known as a Lindenbach projector. In other words, we use that in theater a lot, where you project shadows. Basically, I went to school as a theater major and having a career in theater. But I sort of made a left turn because one afternoon I had no money, I had no girlfriend, I had nothing, but I was a big shot in the theater department, I had all the keys of the theater department, and I was just waiting for rehearsal, and they were showing Sergei Eisenstein, October, 10 Days That Shook the World. I saw this Russian movie made by Eisenstein, and I had never seen anything like it. And I came out of it, I said, wow, I'm going to be a movie director. I'm not going to go to Yale, I'm going to go to film school. And that changed my life.
In your process of realizing the architecture and design of Megalopolis, pulling from this deep well of personal fascinations that started 40 years ago, what did you discover, and what fascinates you most about architecture in a cinematic sense?
Well, I mean, I think there's no doubt that all artists control time. From the very first painter or cave painter made a scene of some animals, they were stopped. So you can't be an artist without essentially manipulating time. That quote of Goethe is very beautiful, that architecture is frozen in music. So as such, I don't find it unusual to manipulate time. Filmmakers do it all the time. They're always going back and rewinding and repeating and manipulating. And maybe time itself, maybe we human beings don't understand time because our brain is so devoted to our survival that I wonder how accurately we really see the thing out there that we're in. There are Hindu philosophy that believes that all things are the same. That the God of destruction and the God of creation is the same God. That means when we're standing on a mountain, down and up is the same thing, but we see down as, well, we better see it as down as death, because if we fall, we'll die, and up will be okay. So our human perception is so manipulated for our survival that it's not accurate.